Our gospel reading today reminds me of a scene in one of the movies that made a very deep impression on me in the 1980s. A movie entitled The Mission. Like John the Baptist, who was treated as an object of curiosity and was subjected to scrutiny by the people sent from Jerusalem, the Jesuit missionaries too were treated with a lot of suspicion by the natives in that movie set in the 16th century. Right at the opening scene of that movie, the Spanish Jesuit missionary named Father Gabriel, the character played by Jeremy Irons, and his companions are actually doing a follow-up mission to the secluded natives of the Guarani tribe in Paraguay. In that scene, Father Gabriel climbs a rocky mountain right next to a raging waterfalls in order to reach the tribe that had just killed a missionary priest who had visited them earlier. They had reacted in a very hostile way to that earlier visitor. They even tied his body to 2 pieces of logs shaped into a cross. And then they threw him into the river that spewed him out of the mouth of the waterfalls. Now the new visitor, Father Gabriel, is coming, of course, with a lot of fear and trepidation. And when he reaches the top of the cliff after climbing a very steep and rocky mountain, he walks into a forest. And he's not aware that he is already being followed by the natives with their bows and arrows. He sits on a rock, and then he takes out from his backpack an oboe, meaning a windpipe musical instrument, a bit like the flute, but different. And he begins to play a haunting tune that attracts the natives. And when the natives realize that he is harmless and that he is not bringing any weapon, they approach him. They surround him, and they listen very intently to the beautiful music that he is playing. Well, they were probably wondering why this foreigner was so daring. He was not afraid of them, in spite of the fact that they had just killed an earlier missionary who had come to their place. And so soon, their hostility is replaced by a friendly welcome that paves the way to a successful mission of evangelization among the Guaranis. In our gospel today, we are told that the priests and the Levites had been sent in order to ask John the Baptist, sino daw siya? Who are you? You know, I find this question very curious because I would presuppose nakilala naman nila siya. They knew well who he was. John the Baptist was not a stranger to them. He belonged to a well-known priestly family in Judea. Remember, St. Luke tells us that the father of John the Baptist was Zechariah, who was a priest in the temple in Jerusalem. And his mother, Elizabeth, also belonged to the priestly family of Aaron. So how come they're asking, "Who are you?" Palagay ko, ang talagang gusto nilang malaman, ano ba ang mission mo? What are you up to? He was a son of a temple priest, but he abandoned the temple. So why did you turn your back on the priesthood? Why are you living in the desert? Why are you baptizing people in the Jordan River? Why did you leave behind your family, your elderly parents? There were just too many questions surrounding the mission and purpose of John the Baptist. People were curious. And some of them were reacting in a very hostile way. If we may summarize the question, dalawa lang eh. Who sent you? And what were you sent for? Ganyan naman ang mission. If you're a missionary, somebody must have sent you. And if you were sent, may mission ka. What is it? You know, this is a timely reflection, especially as we celebrate in the church in the Philippines a year of mission in preparation for next year, the 500th year of Christianity in the Philippines. Mission is also the constant challenge of Pope Francis in most of his messages and exhortations to the Catholic world. Remember, nung dalawin niya tayo sa Pilipinas in 2015, yun din ang challenge niya. Sabi niya, go out to the peripheries. Go out and get involved. Participate in the mission of the church. Let us stop being too self-referential, focused on ourselves, too parochial. Let us go out to the world. I have friends who have asked the question, why are you celebrating the 500th year of Christianity? Why are you trying to commemorate 1521? Are you also commemorating colonialism? Hindi ba ginamit lang ang Kristyanismo as a tool for the colonial rule of the Spaniards in the Philippines? In the same movie, The Mission, what made the natives really suspicious was the fact that along with the gentle missionaries, there also came some mercenaries. Ang lapit ng word missionary sa mercenary. May dumating ding mga mercenaries like Rodrigo Mendoza, who was a ruthless slave trader who treated the natives like animals, who captured them and sold them as slaves and transported them using the same galleons that carried the missionaries. So you shouldn't be surprised by the hostility. In the movie, the mercenary, Rodrigo Mendoza, is converted. He becomes a missionary after an important turning point in his life. He falls into a depression and wallows in guilt because he had murdered his own brother out of jealousy. His brother had fallen in love with his girlfriend. And the one who counseled him and accompanied him was the Jesuit missionary, Father Gabriel. And there is a very moving scene in that movie when Rodrigo, after repenting of what he had done, made an act of penance. He climbed the same mountain along with the Jesuit missionaries, dragging with him the symbols of his former mercenary life as a slave trader. Pati yung kanyang espada, his helmet, his shield, very heavy armor, nakabalot sa isang lambat, binitbit niya. He carried and dragged them all. At yun ang penitensya niya. And when he reaches the top of the mountain, the beautiful scene there, moving scene, was when the natives themselves liberated him. They cut off the rope that was tied to the net that contained the heavy armor that he was dragging along as an act of penance. They liberate him from his guilt. And this man who used to treat them like animals becomes a gentle missionary who brings them the gospel. And they welcome him. Are we also celebrating the 500th year of colonial rule in 2021? No. We reject colonialism. If the Christian faith was nothing but a tool for colonialism, perhaps we should ask, how come? How come our ancestors, after they rejected the Spanish colonial rule, kept the Christian faith? Kung ang Kristyanismo at kolonyalismo ay iisa lang, bakit nang itapon ng kolonyalismo, hindi tinapon ng Kristyanismo? That means they knew hindi sila pareho. Meaning, they were also discerning. I am sure our ancestors were also suspicious of the motives of the first missionaries who came to these islands. I'm sure they also asked themselves the questions, who sent these people? What is their real purpose? Did the men who came with the swords have the same mission as the ones who came with the cross? Was the cross just an instrument of the sword? I can only suppose that our own native ancestors had enough intelligence also to be able to distinguish one from the other, the Father Gabriel from the Rodrigos, and that even the Rodrigos were not innately evil people. They could also be converted. I can only suppose that they had the intelligence to discern the motives of the foreigners that had come into their lives. Tama si St. Paul. In the second reading, ang sabi niya, retain what is good, reject what is evil. Meaning to be a Christian is to be intelligent, spiritually intelligent. You have to have the wisdom to retain what is good and to reject what is bad. Well, the natives must have also seen a lot of goodness in the missionaries who came to them. While it is true that there were those among them who abused their hospitality, there were also those among them who genuinely cared for them. You know, the first Bishop of Manila, Fray Domingo de Salazar, he got into conflict with the colonial government because he defended the natives against forced labor. Kaya yung typical na caricature ng praile is really a caricature. The natives must have been struck by the adventurousness, the courage, the sacrifice, and the sincerity of many of the missionaries who had left behind their own country and their own homes and families. Many of them were never even able to return and see their families again. They even dared to learn the native languages and to live with our ancestors. And so what we celebrate is the gift of faith. And we take the Christian faith as a gift. It is not a curse, it's a gift. And it is not a gift of Spain or the Spanish monarchy. It is a gift of God who used Spanish missionaries in order that the good news of God's kingdom might reach our shores. Siyempre, of course, no, not all of them were properly motivated by mission. Some of them also came as mercenaries. Kahit sa mga pari at praile at misyonerong pumunta dito, there were some who were also not properly motivated. The priests and the Levites and the Pharisees who questioned John the Baptist, they also preached God and religion. You see, not all people who preach God and religion are really representing God. But the people were intelligent enough to distinguish their motives from those of John the Baptist and later from those of Jesus as well. Sabi ko nga, matalino din sila. John, did not come pontificating about the righteous practices of the priests, the Levites, and Pharisees in the temple of Jerusalem. But his solitude, his simplicity, his asceticism, and his boldness and courage as a prophet caught the imagination of his people. Above all, they were struck by his humility. Hindi siya nagpapanggap na siya yung Messiah. Ang sabi niya, I'm just a voice. I'm just a messenger. And if you are a messenger, who sent you? Well, the gospel writer says it very plainly, right at the start. A man named John was sent from God. John the Baptist quotes the prophet Isaiah to explain to the people who had sent him and for what purpose. He says, quoting Isaiah, I am sending my messenger, meaning he is just a messenger with a message from the sender, and the sender is God. You see, prophets identified themselves as messengers of God. But not all prophets were real prophets. There were true prophets and false prophets as well. But if people are discerning, they will be able to distinguish the true messengers from the false messengers. They are the medium, but their lives are also the message. And so, when Jesus came preaching the good news of the kingdom of God, good news to the poor, liberty to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, release to prisoners, and a year of favor from the Lord. They didn't listen only to his message. They looked at his person. And right there in the person of Jesus, they saw the message incarnate. So, we celebrate a year of mission, and we recall 1521, in coming year 2021, to celebrate a gift. But we make sure what the gift is. It is the gift of faith that God has given us through people who came with very many different motives.